All right, we're going to be all giddy tomorrow night because it is one of the off-season events that we wait for, and it's finally here. Usually it happens before the draft, guys. It's happening now on Thursday, May 7, and usually when it happens, you've got basketball playoffs, hockey playoffs, baseball season has just started, and the schedule release still dominates the conversation. Well, now it's all we got. The NFL's 256-game regular season schedule to be released tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. And look, Peter, let me start with you. We expect a normal-looking schedule, but I also expect that there will be plenty of clues that people will immediately start scouring the schedule to try to find as to what the NFL's contingency plans may be.
Mike, I would look for those clues, and I would look for in the first 2 or 4, maybe both weeks of the season. Look for those weeks to be portable. In other words, look for those weeks to be able to easily fit on the end of the current schedule, so that perhaps week 3 or week 5, if the season has to be delayed, would be the NFL's first week of the season. And then either 2 or 4 weeks could get simply and easily tacked on to the end of the season, so that the last 4 weeks of the season would actually be the last 4 weekends in January, and the playoffs would begin February 6th. Now, I don't know that's going to happen. No one knows it's going to happen. But for the NFL, the one thing they don't want to do, they know that they're going to have an imperfect season if and when they play. They know they might only be able to play X games this year, and they also know, and no one will say it inside the league yet, that it's possible that not every team will play 8 home and 8 away. So I think what the NFL is going to try to do with this schedule is make it the most malleable it can, so that it will be possible to pick up the schedule with week 1, let's say, being in the week 5 schedule that they delivered to America on Thursday night.
Well, is there any inklings or clues, have you, either one of you heard? Are we going to hear any contingency plans when they do release the schedule tomorrow night? I mean, are we going to hear anything about?
I don't think so, Chris.
No, you don't
I don't think you're going to hear anything like that. I think the NFL is simply going to say that, hey, look, here's our plan right now, and this could change. But as of right now, this is our plan, and we intend to go forward as long as there are no detours, no roadblocks coming forward. But I think we all know that there are some roadblocks coming forward.
Right. I mean, that's where I want to ask you guys. Are you curious to why even have the schedule release yet? Why? Well, let's not wait. Let's try to let things flush out a little bit, right? I mean, to me, that is the biggest question right now is, let's have a schedule release, and we're not really sure what the schedule will be for life here in America, and then we'll, reorganize from there. I mean, I understand it. I understand, it's kind of the tradition of the NFL to do it this time of the year, but it's just a different year. And it just, to me, seems right now, there has to be 10 different contingency plans. To what Peter said, maybe we got to cut games out. What do we do about teams and states that might not be open for business or might have different rules and laws, and you can't stay and practice in those states or have large gatherings? I mean, that's where I'm just, just confused as far as why we're doing it quite yet.
Well, and there's a balance that has to be struck between creating a sense of normal, but also having the contingency plans in their pockets. And they do. But from the NFL's perspective, the idea is project confidence, project a sense that they are resolute, that they are determined, that they have their plan. And if the plan has to change later, so be it. But for now, here's our plan. 256 regular season games, with the Chiefs hosting someone on Thursday, September 10, to get the season started, and it all goes from there. And if they have to change it, they will. Now, remember this. There continues to be, whether it's justified or not, there continues to be a sense of optimism within the league that by the time we get to September, the world will be dramatically different than it is today. The testing will be much more prevalent, easily available, easy to do, a quick swab of the mouth, a prick of the finger, for diagnostic testing, for antibody testing. The tests will be everywhere. And by then, the thinking is that our collective mindset will be, you know who you are if you need to stay home. You know who you are if you can go out in public, if you can go to a game, especially if they have the antibodies. And we know by then more about what it means to have the antibodies, which are evidence that the virus is already processed through your body. So I think that this schedule is the reflection of that confidence, Peter, that the league has, that by September, things will be much different than they are now, even if no one is really coming out and saying it that way.
No question about it, Mike. And it could well be that they'll play the 256 games exactly in the order that the NFL says that they'll play it. But this is different, right, than free agency or the draft. Free agency and the draft basically are not something that it's a scheduled event, but it doesn't mean that you have to do anything right now. Okay, you're going to change teams if you're a free agent, but you don't necessarily have to go to that team yet. You're going to get drafted by a team in the draft, but you don't necessarily have to go there yet. With the release of the schedule, one of the reasons the NFL releases the schedule is it gives a little bit of juice to all 32 teams, and quite honestly, to a lot of people in the travel industry, for people scheduling their trips for the season. Buying tickets, the group of college roommates, who went to Ohio State and they meet in Cleveland every year to go to a Browns game or something like that. Well, I doubt sincerely that there are going to be many or any schedules made tonight, or plans made for big junkets anywhere in the United States coming this fall. Now, who knows? Maybe they will. But I just don't really see the urgency to release the schedule right now. I don't really think that there's any good reason for it.
Right.
Because it could very well be that on July 20th, they're going to say, okay, we now know that Team X is not going to play at home, cannot play at home until Thanksgiving. So Team X is now moving to City Y. And, so all I can say is, to me, there was no good reason to do the schedule now. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but I just think the NFL is going to have to get out a big eraser. There's a good chance in 2 months. And I just don't really understand why it's happening now, other than the fact, well, we do this every year. Let's project confidence that we're going to play the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. That's why I raised the question there at the start of the segment. It just, to me, it just seems a little presumptuous at this point. And it does seem that, right now, it seems realistic to think that 16 games are not going to happen in the normal fashion that we know it to be. And the schedule is not going to be completely normal. Now, listen, does it add juice and excitement? Am I excited? Yeah, I'm excited. I'm starving for anything. I mean, I'll take any sort of live action, live TV they can get to us right now. Here's the other thing I think that's interesting. If you're a team, right? Let's just say you're the New England Patriots and you're scheduled all of a sudden. It's week 1. The schedule came out. You're going to Kansas City. All of a sudden you're Bill Belichick and you spend two months on preparing for Kansas City and all this. And then things change. I mean, I know these aren't like world-ending problems, but there could be a lot of angry coaches who go, man, I wasted a lot of time because you guys had this schedule release and we kind of got ready with game plans and maybe to start a training camp or whatever it may be to prepare for that game and even maybe the second game, because that's what teams do too. They'll prepare for game 1 and a little bit of game 2 to where that's, a moot point. I know that's not like world changing or anything like that, but that certainly is going to frustrate some coaches and some players along the way if this does happen.
Well, and Chris, you're touching on something that I want Peter to elaborate on, the idea that there necessarily will be some competitive imbalances here. You wrote about it Monday. It is unavoidable. I mean, what if the season begins with stadiums empty in some states, and then later in the year, the stadiums are open? And if you're the 49ers and you went to Seattle in September and there were no fans there, so it was a hell of a lot easier to play the Seahawks in their own stadium, but then the Rams go in December and the stadium's full and they're registering earthquakes on the local Richter scale because of how loud it is there. You've got a competitive imbalance in that NFC West. It feels like somebody's going to get screwed and somebody's going to get an unfair benefit once they start, as you said, taking the eraser out, or just by virtue of when stadiums are allowed to accommodate fans.
You know, Mike, I quoted a top team executive in my column on Monday, and he said basically at some point, we're going to have to start accepting the fact that this is going to be a year where there are going to be some inequalities, just like the one you just mentioned. And with all due respect to that scenario with the Seattle Seahawks, wah.
Oh, no, I know, but look, no, I agree with you, but it's going to happen.
But some team is going to say that. I understand, right, Mike. Some team is going to say that, and I guarantee you, when they say it, I'm going to start playing the violins, and I'm going to say, nut up, baby. Because you have to understand that this year absolutely is going to be different from any other year. And because it's different from any other year, who really cares if some team has to play in Seattle with a crowd and some team got the benefit of not playing? And Mike, I'll tell you the big deal, in my opinion, the big deal is going to be if some team, and I look, we can all speculate whatever we want about this, but I would bet that some team might play an imbalanced number of home and road games. And if that happens, now that's a real, competitive imbalance. But again, if somebody does, to me, a coach or a GM or an owner who has to play an imbalanced number of home and road games would curry a lot of favor, not just within the league, but in the United States, who say, hey, listen, we're lucky to be playing football this year.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm not going to whine about having 6 home games and 10 road games.
Yeah, right. You're right. And man, I almost lost it with your little phrase there. Buck up, Bart, is what I like. I like what you said there. You're funny. But
usually Sims is the one I have to worry about for 2 hours, Peter, not you.
Yes, you got to worry about Peter too. He's got a big mouth and it's not a great filter, just like me. So it's perfect. But I do look at it and go, if the season gets shortened, first off, I agree with a lot what Peter said. It's going to look very insensitive if teams are sitting there, people are dying, dealing with worldly issues, health issues, money issues, and teams complaining, I only had 4 home games and this team had 5 home games. That's not fair. That won't look good, to Peter's point. You're right. And it just seems like, hey, 1982, 1987 strike seasons, they were very weird and different, and it's just going to be about the teams that prepare the best to deal with what's about to face them and who can handle it the best and limit the distractions and not be worried about, where we're playing a game and this team got to play home and we didn't and whatever else it may be. So it's going to be an imperfect year. I have no doubt about that. I just don't see how it can be a perfect 16-game schedule and everything as of right now, unless there's just a dramatic shift in COVID-19 and how it's kind of, being dealt with by the world right now.
And Chris, I'm glad you mentioned 1982 and 1987 because both seasons were impacted by strikes. Washington won the championship both years, and there's no asterisk applied to their Lombardi trophies. In 82, for anyone out there who doesn't remember or wasn't alive, there ended up being only 9 games in the season because of the strike. And each conference had an 8-team tournament to determine who got to the Super Bowl. Nobody ever says that takes away from what Washington accomplished that year. 87, there was a week that was lost to the strike. Then 3 weeks of replacement games where some teams had the foresight to have a replacement team that was worth a crap, and some teams just didn't care. And you know what? At the end of the day, that kept good teams out of the postseason, and it let teams that weren't worthy in, and Washington won the Super Bowl, and nobody said jack squat about it then, and nobody says anything about it now. So when we talk about this potential for imbalance, inequity, more road games than home games, empty stadiums here, full stadiums there, when it's time for someone to raise that silver trophy, and hopefully that eventually happens, they will join the pantheon of Super Bowl champions, and that will be that, and no one will say we need to scratch an asterisk into that trophy, Peter.
Yeah, Mike, I think you couldn't have said it any better. I agree totally. And I just want to make one other point about sort of, the league as a whole this year with this entire issue. Okay, so Roger Goodell basically in this year so far has had probably the best collective year of his commissionership. He gets a new CBA that extends the labor agreement for another decade. He stands firm for free agency and the draft at a time when there's nothing going on in America, and everybody says, thank you, NFL. So this is as good a 5-month run as Roger Goodell has had, I think, as the commissioner of the NFL. But I think now he's got to look at this in a different way, okay? Whereas he's got to be very steadfast. The train's going to run on time. We are running the draft. I think now he has got to look at the NFL season, and he can't say everyone will have access to their facilities, everyone will play 8 home games and 8 road games, or else we're not playing. You're not going to be able to do that, probably, or you're not going to have a season. So I think Roger Goodell has sort of got to do what good NHL teams do on the power play. They change on the fly. And so I think he will do that. He's smart enough to realize that if the county commissioner in Santa Clara County, California, issues an edict that says, and he has basically said, I don't see any games in our county until Thanksgiving. Now, who knows? That can change. But if that happens, they just got to figure it out. They can't stop the NFL season because one team is not going to be, quote, treated fairly. And I think the NFL is going to come to that realization.
Peter, something you said there reminded me of a line from a great American rock and roll song. If the train's on time, you can get to work by 9. Taking care of business. That's what the NFL is trying to do. That's what we're trying to do.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.